travel more than 2,000 miles to get to CIMC Squamish today? A couple people? Well, you're not alone. This little guy, fresh from a farmer's field in Southern California, to be with us here this morning. Doesn't he look just fantastic? But he's had a bit of a rough week of travel, if I'm being completely honest. He looked a little perkier when he was younger, although we all did, didn't we? You see, it took a lot to get him here. One of the things it took, of course, was a lot of diesel fuel. But then it also took a lot of this stuff, didn't it? Any guesses as to how many liters of wonderful, fresh California water went into making that little guy? 300 liters? Boy, that would be a lot. Well, I'm going to cut to the punchline. It's about 26 liters. This isn't actually even 26 liters, but it was about that much. You know what else it took a lot of was this stuff. Have you ever read the warning label on a jar of pesticide? It has a lot of warnings. One of the ones that captured my attention was the advice that you should wash, if you use pesticide, that you should wash your hands before you go to the bathroom. So with that lovely thought, I think we should get him ready to eat, shall we? Look at this. Oh, yeah. Now, we have to cut off the bottom part of this because it's a little sort of hard and woody. We can't really eat that bit. And then some of these outside leaves are sort of getting a little... I just bought this yesterday from a grocer. These top bits are sort of nasty. We'll get this. Okay. So this is about what we have left to eat. And this is about what we're going to throw in the compost bin. It's a lot of waste, isn't it? It really is. And especially when you think of the fact that we as Canadians consume about 1.5 billion of these a year, and we import most of them. It's an awful lot of waste, isn't it? Well, luckily, there is a much better way to do it. You see, the technology now exists that let us grow leafy greens where we live. There are some bits of produce that you can ship anywhere. You can send an apple, you can send a potato almost anywhere in the world and it'll be just fine. But this sort of thing just doesn't travel well. It's got thin leaves, and the minute you harvest it, it begins to decay. And once it begins to decay, it just creates an awful lot of waste. But this is one of the lucky ones. He got to make it up here to be at the CIMC with us all, but a bunch of his friends never even left the farmer's field. They didn't look quite good enough. But the ones that do look good enough, they go into a crate and then on a truck and then into a warehouse and then on another truck, and they cross the border, and then they come finally to the distribution center, and then they get to the retail store. But when the clerk opens up the box with all of his friends, if they don't look quite good enough, then those ones go into the compost as well. But the ones that get on the shelf, like this one that I bought yesterday, when I bring it home, I've got to eat it pretty quick because they seem to go bad. I don't know about your house, but I seem to throw away half of the produce that I bring home if it's a leafy green because they just don't last very long. But this is all going to change. You see, just like 50 years ago, greenhouses changed how we grow peppers, cucumbers, and tomatoes. Now the technology exists to be able to grow commercial scale amounts of produce locally in the leafy green space. And here it is. This is a CubicFarm system. If it looks like a bunch of shipping containers, they sort of are, but they're actually custom-built stainless steel, individually climate-controlled machines that, assembled as a system, let you grow leafy greens 12 months a year and be able to do it anywhere on Earth. I'll just show you something else. We're installing this in Pitt Meadows, British Columbia, just a few miles down the road right now. It'll be open in 2 weeks. It'll be the largest vertical farm in Canada and one of the largest in the world. This will be able to grow over 1.2 million heads of lettuce. So here's what it looks on the inside. It's a bunch of trays, LED lights at the top, trays of produce that all come to the front of the machine where you can stand and you can harvest and you can plant. So it's very easy, physically easy work. Isn't that ridiculously good looking lettuce? And don't I look ridiculous in a hairnet? So you see how you can just take the head of lettuce, cut the root off, and put it right onto the plate? Doesn't that look wonderful? Well, here's a tray of it. We grew this in Langley in March, and there was snow on the ground. Pretty cool, eh? And we can grow 1.5 million of these things, 4,000 heads every 2 weeks out of each of those machines that I showed you. That's pretty cool. Imagine being able to do this with snow on the ground, as opposed to a bunch of diesel, bunch of fresh water. Guess how much water this took to grow? Each head takes about that much. That's pretty good. And when you grow it in a completely contained environment where there are no pests, you don't need any pesticide was the right answer to that question. And as you saw in that short film, when you can take a nice head of lettuce and just cut the root off and put it right onto the plate, put your dressing on, what ends up happening is that you don't have the waste that you have when you harvest something 10 days earlier in a field. Because the minute you harvest a head of lettuce, it begins to decay. It begins to lose its nutritional value. It's not as crunchy anymore, and it won't last as long. But when you grow something that's a single serving size head of lettuce and you harvest it and you leave the root on, it'll live in the fridge for about 3 weeks. That's amazing. And it still smells perfect, it tastes perfect, it retains all of its nutritional value. It's absolutely fantastic. So the technology exists now to grow commercial scale quantities of leafy greens and do it locally where people live. So we can stop this madness, can't we? So what should we all do? I think the next time you go into the grocery store, you should ask the grocer, could we get locally grown produce 12 months a year? The technology exists now. Why don't we do it? And could we grow it using far less water? And could we grow it in a way that doesn't have to be shipped for thousands of miles? And could it be grown in a clean environment so we don't have to use so much pesticide? And could we get it grown in a single serving size so we don't have to chop up so much and throw it away? And could we harvest it and leave the root on so it'll last for a long time and retain its nutritional value? You know what's interesting is this little bit that we always have to chop off because it's all hard and woody. If you take a single serving size head of lettuce and harvest it just above the root, did you know that the most flavorful part of lettuce is the part that's right above the root? It's the sweetest part of the lettuce, and that's the part that we've been throwing away forever. So, I will leave you with pretty good for growing with snow on the ground, eh? Thanks very much.